everyone, and welcome to What's Wrong with the Podcast. Today, we're delighted to be speaking with Keith Kirkland. Keith is the co-founder of WearWorks, a haptic design company that builds products and experiences that communicate information through touch. Their first product, WAYBAND, is a wrist-wearable haptic navigation device for the blind and visually impaired. In 2017, it was used to help the first person who was blind to run the NYC Marathon without sighted assistance. Keith is an engineer, a designer, and a futurist that is deeply excited about reimagining the future of touch through design while expanding the human ability to sense our environments. He has worked with organizations ranging from the Met Museum, the Cooper Hewitt Design Museum, the DAHRC, Unilever, Futureworks, Discovery Channel, TED, Dropbox, the Yokohama Government, Coach, and the National. Keith, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please do tell us more about yourself and how WearWorks came about.
Yeah, so I guess WearWorks came about. It was the brainchild of me and my two co-founders, Kevin and Young. We met at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn while we were doing our industrial design program there. Young and I were classmates as part of the master's program, and Kevin and Young did a joint thesis. And then subsequently, Kevin and I ended up working together at an internship at the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Media Lab. So, we all kind of had this connection, and I spent my whole year working on a thesis, trying to do stuff in haptics around movement learning. And so basically, I was trying to see if you can build a suit that would allow a person to download Kung Fu, and the suit would teach them using vibrations. And,
nice.
And yeah, exactly. It was super cool. I love that.
The testing of that should be very fun.
I know, exactly. And the way it works out was that I realized that we never built the suit out fully, built out like small parts of it to test things out, like an arm sleeve. Realized it could be done. Very complex problem to like get everything working. But the bigger problem was that even if I got everything working, I still need some way of having you understand that this vibration means you should raise your shoulder 2 inches up, and so without that language or without that communication, the whole suit was basically, it was useless. And so first kind of set out like, okay, I need to figure out what this language needs to be and how to create that. So I was heading out after we graduated, and I was about to start my own thing, just like trying to figure out how to build this language so I can make this Kung Fu suit. And my co-founders were also doing some stuff in the haptic space. Kevin had been working with a company that was developing this new haptic motor. And it was amazing. Like you could hold two motors in different hands, and the vibration would make it feel like there was a vibrating ball and a string, and it was going in between one hand and the other. And
nice.
Nothing connected the two things. It was just like all illusion. And you're just like, wow, this is pretty awesome. And so to me, it's like when I first saw that technology, I saw like, wow, this haptics thing has like a super huge potential. You can do stuff like this with it as opposed to just buzz, 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 like your phone is ringing, So we all left, and they connected with me shortly after graduation and was like, hey, we're about to start a company doing some stuff in haptics. You did haptics for a whole year. You want to join us? And I was like, okay, let's do it. I was going to do it by myself anyway. Having haptics, like it's more interesting. So. And we kind of set out on a path, but, not thinking more of it than let's see what we can do. And we applied for this television show, America's Greatest Maker, which was a thing that was sponsored by, I think it was IBM who sponsored it. And it was basically like $1 million top prize for like a wearable technology something. And we're like, hey, this is us. Let's enter. And we didn't get accepted into the competition. We made it to the second round of interviews, and totally like because of a scheduling like miscommunication, we weren't able to have the second interview. And then they hit the deadline, and basically we just never got a call back again. And we were like, wow. But then we took the same stuff and applied it to like this New York incubator called Next Top Maker at the time. And basically they picked us as one of they picked us as one of 6 companies after interviewing maybe about 80. And we were definitely the least far along in the cohort. We had like this ridiculous prototype of like vibrating motors on a seatbelt and like sewn in, and like you vibrate the motors like buzz, 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 buzz. And you put it on someone's arm and like hold your arm out, like put it on their arm. And then it's like, can you feel which way the vibrations is going? It's like, yeah, it's going down. I'm like, yeah. You know, that's haptics. You know, like, so, you know, yeah, whatever, right? And I remember that day because we saw other people who were like there, and it was like, hey, we make giant 3D printers. Here's our giant 3D printer, and here's a giant 3D thing that it printed. And we're like, here's a video and a seatbelt with some like vibrating motors hot glued to them. You know what I'm saying? Like, and surprisingly, they picked us. And
potential.
yeah, I guess, you know, it was like, you know, and I know I talked to them one time before. I was like, I don't know what made you guys like pick us. And it was like, but it was like, this thing is crazy, but if it really works, like it's gonna be awesome. And I was like, cool, thanks for your faith, you know, like. But then once we got that $10,000, we just made a video of like, here's what it would be like if you could navigate with.
Right.
We didn't actually know how to do it, you know, like we didn't do anything to do it before. And then all of a sudden we had this money, so we were like, well, you know, we have this demo day, and I guess they want to try it out, so it should be built by then, you know. And that was kind of like our impetus to like, okay, now we have this money, you know, very little bit of money, let's go ahead and create the experience. And we figured it out in about 2 or 3 months of like how to do it really simply. And, you know, 2 years later, that same, you know, navigation helped, you know, like a person who was blind running a marathon without sighted assistance. So yeah, it was a wonderfully crazy journey, but ultimately, like, we really connected around this idea around what if you could just offload some of this visual information, because everything is trying to get your visual attention. You know,
Right.
like, what if we can just offload some of that to the skin and use this communications channel that like is basically, you know, I mean, it's doing stuff, but not, you know, not really as much as it could be doing, you know, like,
Right.
you know. So we're like, okay, cool, let's use touch as a channel to deliver information. And that way we can keep people's ears and eyes free to focus on whatever it is that they're actually doing, not the information that they need to keep doing what they're doing.
So interesting. I think, you know, it's, first of all, I mean, I love that where you landed. I mean, it's always a long journey, and I'm so glad you also shared it, because I think it's so important to be real about the initial parts of starting out something, because anybody who wants to start out something, I think, needs to listen to those. And I think, like, in terms of what it enabled to any visually impaired person, and suddenly made the streets all accessible. It's very, very interesting. And why do you think, like, as you were doing this research, how do you think this technology could enable even further access or further flexibility for the users? I remember, I think one thing that I tried was, you know, these things that came out that sort of like stop you from hunching over, sort of vibrates so you like sit straight.
Yes.
So I got one of those. I'm like, okay, this is genius. Like, I'm definitely going to test this. So it's really interesting that, you know, when your attention is on something else, like, you're really not concerned about like sitting straight at that moment. Like, it really did not even like, I didn't register it. Like, and after a while it would make me feel like annoyed, and I would take it off. Or like when I was pregnant, I guess my body was just like naturally hunched in a way, so it kept like vibrating. So I just couldn't use it. So I think, like, in that sense, still, I think like something like that could have potential. But what you're doing is kind of like, it is a big safety measure as well. Like, if in cars, if it vibrates, you can't afford to be like, oh, okay, I'm just going to ignore it for a second and like continue in that direction.
Yeah.
It has such urgency built in as well. That is very interesting, I think. And how do you think it could even further aid any accessibility issues?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing is that like the way I like to think about it, and you know, I'm definitely not the originator of this concept, but like, you know, the way I like to see it is kind of like disability is really like a design problem. You know, like
Yeah.
if we all couldn't see, we wouldn't have built a world where sight was necessary. We would have figured out other ways. That's kind of how we work. So, you know, like we built this environment based off of, you know, like like, you know, common human infrastructure, you know what I'm saying? And the people who don't have access to that, especially when you see how heavily information in particular skews toward vision, that like if you don't have access to vision, basically that information doesn't exist for you. You know, and so we always kind of saw like the skin as like this next frontier of communication, like that was a much more accessible because just more people had access to touch information. Um,
Right.
you know, it's also the thing also too is that like touch information when compared to vision is like much lower resolution. You know, like it's kind of like a movie file versus like a text document, right? You know, and
Right.
so
Right.
you know, the one thing is that like you can understand touch information if you, and this is why we like what we mean when we say haptic design. Like if you're designing the experience within the realm of how the human body understands information and how like the same way like we design visual information, like you put something red that means danger, you know, like eyes draw immediately to red, big thing,
Right.
space around things. Like a graphic designer can design the path that your eye would take around a poster if they understand their craft really, really well. And that's the thing that we want to do with touch. And that's what we feel like we can do. And so we initially started out in this concept of this language that you would have to learn these different buzzes to mean different things. But then we realized that language acquisition is pretty time consuming.
Hmm.
You know, I'm learning Swedish right now. It is like 2 years in, it is not easy, you know, like, and so, you know, we needed something that people could pick up and take out of the box. And like, but you know, like if you get kissed or punched, you kind of understand that information instantly, you know,
Right.
like, so, you know,
So
like,
true.
and there's lots of context around that, like emotional context, like whether you like being kissed or punched, who did the kissing or punching, you know, like, saying like all those things are like factors in, you know, it's not just pure touch information, but the point is we feel like you can tell the difference between love or aggression with an instant with touch.
Hmm.
And what people are kind of designing with at the moment, before it was mainly buzz, 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 your phone is ringing, and then like a little bit more complex for like video games, and then you have like,
Yeah.
like the entire sex toy industry, which is super real, um,
Yeah.
and you have like the therapeutics industry, you know, like, and so like those are kind of like
Hmm.
the main spaces that haptics are playing in. But right now we see in the same way we have screens in our pocket, we kind of see like ubiquitous haptic devices and being able to get ways using other senses other than just sight and just sound.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so true what you said in terms of like getting your message across. Like, of course, you can't kind of like risk, oh, you know, did that mean red light or did that mean like turn right? You know, like that can't be. But it's really interesting. Like, I watched a video and I guess you can sort of explain better than I do to our audience. But so you're sort of like, if you're running in one direction, and
Yeah.
I take it from the story by the athlete that you've worked with, and if you're going in the right direction, you don't feel any buzzing. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're sort of going out of the lane, that is like the, I guess, the secure lane or the clear lane, it will start buzz to warn you. Um,
Yeah.
does that also apply in like you hit like you see red light or there's some big object 1 kilometer from now, like so you might need to turn right. So does that smart navigation also come into play?
Not right now, it doesn't. So right now the device is purely GPS. It's kind of like the same thing you would expect from like Google Maps or Waze,
Mm,
you know, just giving you, instead of giving you the information through visuals or giving the information through audio, we're just communicating that same information through touch. So I think
right.
that's the better way to think about it. But like from the point of view and to address what you're talking about, like there's two parts of navigation. There's micro scale navigation, which is making sure I don't run into this table. I can find the door. I can get out of the building. Those micro movements of navigating
Mm-hmm.
space, and then you have your macro scale navigation, which is where's the post office or what coffee shop am I meeting my friend at? I have no idea. I've never heard of this thing before, right? And so
Mm,
what we're focused on is like macro scale. We built some technology initially for the micro scale navigation, but what we found out was that the macro scale was such a larger problem, and that there were already some really awesome companies in the
yeah.
space that were working on the micro scale as well. So we were like, okay, let them have that lane. And what we can do is we
Mm,
can work on navigation because ultimately for us, and it's something that kind of came from us from the National Federation of the Blind, they told us don't build a blind device, build a device that everybody can use that's optimized for the blind experience. And
so
so
true.
And so we felt that like working on a navigation device where navigation, visual-based navigation has pitfalls and challenges for everyone, the sighted, hearing, and blind communities and
Yeah.
total. And so different challenges for each group, of course, but the idea is that like if you have vision, your vision should be paying attention to where you're going, not on the map.
Exactly.
And if you're listening to audio, that thing is usually annoying. And if audio is the way you see the world because you're blind or visually impaired, then your audio field is being taken up with information that could be used to kind of keep clear so that you can pay attention to things going on around you to keep yourself safe. So we kind of like felt like by building out a product that would touch multiple users with the same exact solution, what we do is we build a more comprehensive solution. And one, we keep one that can be like applied at a more mass level, and thus one that can have better economies of scale with lower price points. Because right now the big challenge, or some of the big challenges in the blind and visually impaired community, is like the staggering unemployment rates. It's like, I think it's like 70% unemployment rates, and that's for people who are actively seeking work, not for people who aren't trying, right? And so one of the things that we see is like, how can we get this device as low cost eventually as we can, so that like any person can be able to basically come out of pocket and purchase one without the need for insurance or any kind of like subsidies. But we're also looking to work with government entities around what subsidies we can get, because ideally we'd like to have some portion of our community that we can provide like devices to, like at no cost to the end user.
Right.
Progress,
Right. I mean, you touched upon so many important points. First off, like addressing to the mass and make the product as inclusive of all stakeholders as possible is really, it would definitely work. And also, like I have a friend, and speaking of like other disabilities, like I have a friend who like both of her arms are paralyzed. She can't navigate herself by, just like looking at her phone all the time. She really needs to stop and look, and audio in her pocket or in her purse is not necessarily working. So she needs to put on headphones, but she can't do that because that's not accessible to her. So
yeah.
I like even other type of disabilities, I think, come into play, and just ease of use. And what you said in terms of not even like many of the things, it's actually about access. And to your point, like starting at a macro scale, but I guess like as these other tools that you're collaborating with are getting smarter and more advanced, like we have driverless cars. It's not a technology that, we're not able to see what's around us or what's coming up. And if Google Maps becomes that, like there's a giant, and it already is, right? There's a car crash, here's a slower route, take that route. That's technically like giving maybe like a pre-warning, but maybe in the future it's going to be like there's a cow in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
you should turn right. So in that sense, like the more those technologies also grow and adapt, the more powerful your technology also becomes too. So it can grow definitely into that. I can definitely see the opportunity there as well.
Yeah, no, like one of the things is that like we're really focused right now really as an output. And so for us, we're starting with GPS information and magnetic compass information, and we're turning that output into touch. We could take radiation levels and turn that into touch. We can take sound or decibel levels or sound patterns and turn those into touch. If you were like wanted to find a particular bird by sound, right? For us, it's like the possibilities of the skin as a communications channel. Like we basically see like with Dyson does for airflow, and what Bose does for sound is what we feel like ultimately we'll be able to do for touch. Like have those types of explorations around how the skin responds. Like for example, like what is like middle C for haptics, right? Like what vibrational frequency, is the thing that the general population will feel is good, right? And of course it's going to vary and blah, 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 blah. But like we won't really be able to understand all this data until we can get large scale data back and start to understand like how does the body really process touch information, and how can we optimize so that like we can find, different ways of like evolving the language that we're building around communicating.
Right, right. I wish, it could have been a very interesting, I guess, a prototype case where, like, during COVID or post COVID, now, we're guided by stickers everywhere, like be 6 feet apart. Like, instead of that, like, inhumane or like sort of goaded community, like, technically a sensor, like, or a haptics measure could just tell you, oh, watch out if you want to, you're getting close, or if you want to keep your distance. Like, I definitely, like, I think the potentials are endless. You talked a little bit about, like, starting on macro scale and some other things that you might do in the future, but, and some other potential applications. But what is in the short, I guess, term future for WearWorks, and what is in, like, the long-term future for WearWorks?
Yeah, and so our short term is really getting ready for our product launch. And so we're launching in 2021 in March is what we're shooting for. And right now we have our team in place, which has been really, really fantastic. They've been working really, really hard. I'm actually in Romania working with part of our software development team that's based out of here. So, that's what initially brought me here. And then I figured, while I'm here, I might as well talk to, people who are blind and visually impaired and organizations that support them while I'm here to see what the ecosystem is. And those conversations have been very fruitful. And so we have our team in place now. We have our manufacturing set up, and we're redesigning the last version of the device. And we'll have our first batch run in October. And so we'll be launching a pilot in November for about 20 to 30 different organizations that we feel represent different parts of the constituency we want to work with. Just to get their understanding, to get their feedback, and then to wrap that feedback into one more round of redevelopment for January to get the devices ready to ship by the end of March. So that's our timeline fully. And basically everything is just like getting ready for launch. Like the software development is like moving ahead full steam. We have a lot of things that we want to implement around different ways of getting better accuracy in the maps, especially around like your precise location data. So we partnered with a few companies in that space that are doing some really amazing things. With WearWorks in particular is a company that takes like a 3x3 meter square, divides the earth up into like 5 trillion of these things, and gives each one an individual 3-word address. So Dog Cat House is a place on the planet somewhere, and it's a 3x3 meter square. And now you don't need an address. You just need to know exactly what square, and you can navigate someone to like that tree next to Central Park, that you're sitting at, right? And so now we can get like a level of detailed accuracy that addresses couldn't give us before. And so that's one of the things that we're doing, is like integrating a lot of these channel partner applications into our experience so that we can basically make the experiences as awesome as possible. But this is all very much like an experiment, like much like everything that we've done, the marathon, the whole haptic idea from the beginning. And so like the way we work is we try stuff out, we build really fast, we put it in the hands of people, we let them give their honest feedback, which is, sometimes pretty bad, and then you go and you fix it, and so that's what we're looking for right now, is like to build out those channel partners. And then we're also allowing people, the device is going to be $249 when it launches in March. But we're doing an early reservation price right now. So basically for $25 down, you can reserve a price of $179. And so we're using that for our early bird supporters and mainly for our channel partners to be able to offer a bit of discount to organizations that serve blind and visually impaired individuals. So those are kind of like the super near-term future. And also like raising like around like our seed round. So we're like 650,000 that we're raising, and we're about 50% closed on that. So looking to close that other,
Congrats.
5. So yeah, so lots of stuff on the short term. And on the long term, like what we ultimately see is we see different expansions of the WAYBAND. And right now, like we started in the blind and visually impaired community, but then we ran a marathon, and then we started talking to a lot of runners who were like, wow, this would be great to run with. I have to train 15 miles,
Mm,
like on an open pathway. If this was optimized for running, like this would be really, really great because, I don't want to look at my map and that audio voice annoys the crap out of me. And so like, okay,
right.
cool. Running, right? And running is kind of right up our alleyway as well. We talked to a lot of people who are in the cycling community who are really, really interested in a navigation device
Mm.
for the same reasons. We talked to snowboarders, kayakers, open water swimmers. We talked to golfers who wanted adaptations of our technology, basically.
Oh, wow.
So right now we see that the WAYBAND has like a lot of applications and what it can do, and we think that like our first few years of exploration will be mainly like delving into like different opportunities for the WAYBAND. We had a conversation with someone from the military, and we're looking at potential doing some work in the space of helping people with vestibular challenges, mainly veterans who improvised explosive devices go off and usually make you deaf or blind or both, and it ruptures the inner ear fluid, making it hard to stay balanced without swaying forward. So people
Oh,
fall.
wow.
So we see lots of opportunities in the space around therapeutics, around especially in the disabilities community. Mainly in that space because the sense of touch is much more deeply appreciated. I feel like, um,
Sure.
and also on the other hand, it's the markets that we're going into usually like haven't been given a lot of attention, and so to walk in and design a solution that really works amazing for them is like actually like financially a very wonderful like opportunity. So you kind of like you create the most value for the users, and
Yeah.
that value gets translated to your company. So we see like a super huge opportunity in the space. Like 1 out of every 5 people on a planet is estimated to have a disability. That's
Yep.
basically a market that's bigger than China, um,
Yep.
and
It's the
largely
largest minority in the world.
largely been ignored by like I mean we're paying attention to it now, and we've done a much better job now than we've done in like centuries prior. Like but I think that like with the space around like mass customization that's possible now with like small batch runs, 3D printings, like and with the space that's available for people to really go into like a smaller market, like now you don't need to make 10 billion of a thing for it to be profitable. Like you can make 10,000 of them, and so
Right.
and find a need that a community that thing serves really, really well. And so I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity in the space around disabilities and like designing for more niche markets that have been like traditionally overlooked.
This is so, so exciting. I mean, and usually whenever the design prioritizes people with disabilities and is more centered around people with disabilities, those products tend to be the most accessible, the most easy to use products anyway. I mean, even from, Microsoft's technologies to the touch screen, like all of that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't tested or created by people with disabilities. So I think in that sense, it's the way to start anyway. And just like so that everybody can benefit eventually from it. So I'm very excited to see where it's going to go and how you guys are going to conquer the world and everyone's going to be wearing a waistband. And then I'm not going to look like I don't know where I'm going. That's my biggest selfish interest. So, if you were to give an advice to someone who's just getting started, has this great idea to address a problem in the world, um, what would be your 1 or 2 liner?
Yeah, I think like find something that you really love doing, and it sounds super cliche, but the reason that that's the case for me is because like this road is so hard, like if I had to talk about the number of times like it almost failed, the number of times that we thought we might have walked away, the number of times it seemed like like the door closed in our face again. Like it's a really hard path, and I think that our path isn't necessarily harder than anyone else's. I think that whatever path you choose, if you go this route, it's hard. And so like the
Yeah.
only thing that's gonna really sustain you through the hardness is like like, it's not going to be how much money you might make in 10 years. You know, like, it's really going to be like, hey, like, did I do something valuable? You know, whatever value is to you, and that's totally arbitrary, and it should be. You know, like, it should be a thing that you decide for yourself. But ultimately, like, if you're not doing something that you love, you know, like, I don't know, it just feels that it feels like you put yourself in a space where you could create like a life that is actually successful because it does all the stuff that you said it should do, but doesn't actually align with who you are and what you actually wanted. Like, if you want to surf all day, you shouldn't work in a place that like is like landlocked and like has no access to water. Like, you should figure out life so that surfing becomes a big part of that, and whatever way that makes sense for you, you know. So yeah, I just felt that like, yeah, we need, I feel like the problems to the, I'm gonna get like super like esoteric, but like I feel like the problems of the world will be solved when everyone starts doing what they love and not doing what they think they should be doing. Because then, you know, like the doctors that would be treating me would like love their job. They wouldn't be the doctors who became doctors because their parents wouldn't pay for their art degree. And nothing against those, you know, people who are doctors, but really, like, I think that there's a different energy that you can bring in when you love the thing that it is that you're doing, that doesn't show up when you did the thing because you thought it would be the right path to take, or, you know, pay you the most money.
I mean, I 100% respect that. And I agree. Like, you know, if you think about it, like maybe being a parent is the toughest job in the world and you only signed up for it because you love your child, you know? So I think if everybody sort of acted like their job is their children, like they love it so much,
Yeah.
I definitely agree that there's a different energy level and enthusiasm and eagerness to do better, because you just want it to be better. Like
Yeah.
that mentality, like that collective mentality could be so impactful. So that's actually a really great advice.
And you know what, like, one of the things is that like we see our company as a vehicle for the life that we want to create for ourselves, right? You know, like, we built this policy called Wherever Works because neither my co-founder or I wanted to be stuck having to like, I don't want to have to like come to the Manhattan office like every single day. I don't think that's necessary. I don't want a life
Yeah.
like, so why don't we just make a life where, you know, that's a thing that's optional, but it's not a thing that's mandatory. So now it's like, you know, I'm in Romania, my co-founder is in DC, our lead
Love it.
architect is in Detroit. You know, like my interns are in like Florida and Georgia, you know, and, you know, it just like, we work it all out, you know. So like, it's funny because this whole remote world happened, we were already moving this way. So it just like, we already had this just like accelerated the growth for us. So like, really like looking at the company that you're building, like not just the product that you're making, and not just the people that you're helping, but, you know, like every part of it is like your impact on the world in some way. And every part of it, if you think about it, can have an impact that like adds more value than it takes away. And, you know, so I think like that's really kind of like the goal for me, and like, you know, creating value, like deep value at every level, you know.
I love that. Thank you so, so much, Keith. This was such a treat. We're very much looking forward to the launch, and I'm glad we were able to feature the episode so that people can actually also get on the wait list.
Yes.
And we look forward to seeing you guys grow and also develop the technology into other applications as well.
Yeah, perfect. And you can find us at www.wear.works, WORKS. And you can find us on Instagram at wear.works as well.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching this week's episode. If you found value in these conversations, please like our video and hit the subscribe button. Make sure to visit our website, podcast.what'swrongwith.xyz, and subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts so you never miss an episode. Please leave us a comment or review, or you can simply tell your friends about us. For more details on our guests, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. You can find our handles in the description below. And don't forget to join us next week.